Hi, Launch Control XL3 is the newest version of Novation's extra-large parameter-based MIDI controller. They are keyboard-focused launch key controllers, or pad and grid launchpad controllers, also have parameter control capabilities, but here the focus is on giving you as much direct hands-on control as possible. Like the previous version, the XL3 can work as a generic MIDI controller for software or hardware gear. And it also has integrations with Ableton Live and other DAWs so that you control elements like devices and the mixer. But compared to the Mark II, the XL3 has been improved in multiple ways. In this video, I'll take a look at what it can do, what's new, and how it's different from the previous version of the Launch Control XL. And also present some tips and ideas for using it with Ableton Live's Session Grid. Before I start, a quick disclosure: Novation sent me the XL3. Other than that, no money changed hands. They have no say over the content of this video and don't get to see it before it's published. Okay, let's learn about the XL3 by diving right into what's new compared to the XL Mark II, and one of the most important things in my opinion is this little screen. The main benefit is that you can directly see the name of the parameter and track that you're controlling along with its value, and even if that value is not numerical. Obviously, it would have been nice if each knob and fader and button had its own screen, but any other controller that does have that costs a lot more, and still there's a big difference between one screen and none. The controls aren't touch sensitive, so you need to either change a value to edit it or hold Shift to preview their value without changing it. This preview functionality currently doesn't work for the faders and buttons. I asked Novation and they might address this in a future firmware update. The screen also shows you which range of tracks you're controlling. Previously, you'd have no way of knowing where you are in a large project just by looking at the controller. The screen is OLED, so it has excellent viewing angles. It's certainly small, but the font size is similar to the labels printed on the panels, so it does a good job of showing you what it is that you're controlling. So that's the screen. Then another big difference between the XL3 and the Mark II is the fact that the knobs are now endless encoders as opposed to pots. This means that you don't have to deal with parameter value pickup issues or scaling, though now there's no physical detent or feedback when you're in the center position or when you've reached the edge of a parameter's value. And another disadvantage of endless encoders is that you can't see the parameter value just by looking at it, at least not in the DAW modes currently. If I move to one of the custom modes, then here the LED brightness does reflect the parameter's value. The one exception currently is in DAW mixer mode, in the panning control where the color changes whether you're panning left or right, though again the intensity doesn't change as you continue to pan back and forth. Then moving on, another important new feature in Launch Control XL is that the LEDs are full color LEDs. That works to show you the track colors as you move around the grid. Same goes for when you create your own custom templates or modes. You've got 16 color choices as opposed to just 4 on the Mark II. Then finally, in terms of big new features, we now have full-size MIDI in, out, and through ports, whereas the Mark II didn't have any MIDI I/O at all. If you wanted to use it standalone with other hardware gear, you'd need a USB MIDI host. Now you can directly control hardware gear without going through a computer or host. And since there's a MIDI in, you could also merge incoming MIDI to a target instrument. You can also configure the second port to work as a direct hardware through to further reduce latency. In terms of DAW controls, the XL3 has integrations with Ableton Live, Logic, FL Studio, and Cubase. I'll be showing you the Ableton Live integration. Check the manual to see which capabilities are supported on other DAWs. Overall, though they're pretty similar, the XL3 gives us a couple of new transport buttons, play and record, and this record activates the proper arrangement or session record function based on which mode you're in, and shift and play continues playback from the stop point. Beyond that, the DAW integration itself has been expanded. We now have 2 modes, DAW control and DAW mixer control. In DAW control mode, we can control 16 device parameters directly as opposed to just 8. And if this little page button lights up, then you can control additional parameters beyond the first 16. You use shift and page up and down to focus on different devices, to control different devices. And then the bottom 8 encoders have various transport controls, changing playback position, zooming in horizontally or vertically, moving around the loop start position, loop end position, activating the loop, turning it on and off, going around across different markers in your project if it has them, and you can see the names here as well, and changing the overall project tempo. And if we head out into session view, then encoder 2 selects the different tracks and encoder 3 the different scenes. There's no way to trigger a scene, unfortunately, directly. And you can't use these buttons to get a view into clips or scenes unless you use the custom modes, which I'll show you later. It would certainly be nice if they added that too. So anyway, that was DAW control mode. And then if we move into DAW mixer mode, you've got control of pans like I showed you earlier. You've got control over the first 2 sends, and you can page up and down to reach additional sends. And if you hop around the project in groups of 8, you can also skip ahead to the returns as well. Now, regardless of which DAW mode you're in, these, of course, control levels, and then these buttons will either solo tracks or arm them, and then mute tracks or select tracks. So that's pretty much it for DAW controls. Besides automatically mapping the knobs and faders and buttons to control DAWs, these controllers also have custom user modes where you can create your own mappings to control software or hardware instruments, or to just control fixed parameters in your DAW as opposed to the dynamically mapping DAW modes. Like the old launch control, you use the component's web page or software to edit the custom modes and send them to the device. You can't edit templates on the device or use MIDI learn to map controls, at least not in the current version of the firmware. Hopefully that's added in the future. You can load up a few of the built-in templates for popular devices or create your own. Just as an example, this mode is one I created for the intro project. And as you can see, I gave parameters full names here. So that to me is the most important new feature, the fact that you can select a control and give it a custom name to have it show up on screen. Beside that, there's support for high-resolution NRPNs or high-resolution CCs. Button options have also been expanded. Besides notes and CCs like you had in the previous generation, you've now got program changes and keystrokes. And like I mentioned, you've got plenty of color choices as opposed to just 4 on the Mark II. You can give each mode its name, so that'll appear on screen as well. And you can program a total of 15 custom modes. You intentionally can't edit mode 16 so that you don't change it by accident. The idea is that both you and instrument developers can rely on its CCs to remain the same. In terms of build, everything feels solid both on the new Launch Control XL and the old one. Though the new one does look more sleek, there's no encoder wobble and the resistance feels good, more or less the same by the way on both. The faders have slightly less resistance compared to the old model, but not in a bad way, and the buttons on both are buttons, meaning not velocity-sensitive pads. A word about settings. You've got global settings and per mode settings. To access the global settings, you press both these buttons for a bit. You move through settings using the page buttons, and you can set the global MIDI channel and turn MIDI through on or off, and some other display settings. And then Shift and Edit goes into the mode settings. Here you can turn external MIDI merge on or off and choose which port you want that mode to send MIDI to. Before we head out to the pros and cons, a few thoughts about how to use this controller within the context of a live set. First tip, assuming your set has multiple songs, arrange your songs so that tracks fit in to multiples of 8, whether it's a session grid or the arrangement view. And the reason is that way you can quickly move between songs by holding Shift and the Tracks button. Jump between groups of 8 tracks, where each group of 8 tracks represents a song. And then an alternative idea for managing multiple songs in a set is to ignore the dynamic DAW modes and instead use the custom modes, where each custom mode represents a song in your set. This way, when you want to hop on to the next song, just change a custom mode. Now, the downside of this approach is that you'll need to map controls manually. So, for example, these are the MIDI mappings that I made for this song. But doing this enables a few things you can't do in the DAW modes. For example, whereas in device DAW control mode, the 16 encoders control all the parameters of one track, in this custom mode, I've mapped parameters on a per track basis. So these control parameters in track 1, these in track 2, track 3, track 4, and so on. It feels very intuitive to control track parameters this way. For example, in the case of this song, I mapped the filter and resonance to control this track, and then this, say, controls the shimmer send for this track, or shimmer send for this track. Another advantage of custom modes is that you can use all 24 encoders to control device parameters, not just the top 2 rows. And then another pro for custom modes is that you can map these buttons to control things other than solo, arms, mutes, or track select. So for example, here I mapped the bottom row of buttons to launch different scenes within this project. In this case, each scene represents a chord in the progression, which means that I'm not bound to a particular progression. So I could, for example, play the chords in a different order to improvise on the fly. I could similarly map buttons to play notes or launch clips, and also stop all the clips in a song before I move to the next one. Okay, let's talk about pros and cons for the XL3. First, when compared to the previous generation, unless you really prefer pots to endless encoders, the new XL3 is a clear win with the screen, endless encoders, MIDI I/O, RGB LEDs, and more. And then when comparing to others, I think the XL3 has two types of competitors: dedicated parameter controllers and keyboard controllers that also have parameter controls. As far as keyboard controllers go, there's not much to say. If you need a keyboard, that's the route you'll want to go, and there are plenty of options from Novation and other companies with faders, knobs, velocity-sensitive pads, and DAW integrations, including clip launching. Then as far as parameter controllers go, the XL3 gives very good value, I think, in terms of features, quality, and number of controls. Alternatives to consider are lower cost options with fewer features, like a used MK2 or a Kai's MIDI mix, or if these were too big, perhaps controllers with fewer physical controls, like the original Launch Control, Korg's Nano Control, or the LPD8. And then if you're willing to pay more, there are options with more screen real estate, so you can see what more than one knob does at a time, like the Roto Control or Electro 1, though those options have fewer control elements. Then on the firmware wishlist side, other interesting developments we're seeing in the controller space are controllers that can run scripts or MIDI effects, like the Electro 1 or Monolith, or let you save snapshots with knob positions and morph between snapshots or macros, like the upcoming Neuzeit Drop, which is much more expensive. The XL3 also currently doesn't have a Huey mode like the old one does. Hopefully those are things we'll see coming in future firmware updates. There's also a secret little button here that currently doesn't do anything. I asked the company and they said they're planning a big firmware update but wouldn't disclose any features, so make sure you check the release notes if you're from the future. So that's it for the Launch Control XL3. If you liked the insights in this video, there are plenty more in my ever-expanding book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks, available to the people who support this channel on Patreon. Hit like if this was useful. Ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.